Now, in terms of the topic of today, I think it's important that we start off by addressing some of the issues that have been happening recently in the media and in the news. Many of us have heard about by now about Ahmed Mohammed, a 14-year-old Sudanese American from Irving, Texas, he had made a clock at home and brought it to school to show his engineering teacher. Now, for his story and what happened to him afterwards, being handcuffed, taken to juvenile delinquency, all of that for many of us hits a chord. It encapsulates the story of the experience of many of American Muslims, both the positive and negatives, and it really has impacted our psyche. On the one hand, you see the increasing impact of Islamophobia, and it's happening on our nation. Our teachers, our educators, our police are on edge. It's evidenced by the reaction of school officials and the Irving police, and the only thing you can blame it is really due to the stereotypes and internal biases people may have. Now, while you have that on the one hand, on the other hand, you see the outpouring of support by our fellow citizens, including the president and many well-known individuals who are not Muslim. Now, what you find is that many of these individuals are also asserting our rights and place in this country, and that is also significant and shouldn't go unnoticed. So when we think about Ahmed, he went after receiving the responses that he did. He posted on Twitter how thankful he was for the support he received, and that he didn't expect people who would care as much since he was quote unquote a Muslim boy. Now that says a lot if you think about it. Ahmed is very aware of his religious identity and how that identity, being Muslim, is currently perceived by society, which then in turn resulted in certain expectations of the world around him. Now, what happened in our situation, in this situation, was the world didn't react based on what he expected. And in fact, this led to a very different outcome. Now, what would happen if society had not reacted the way it did? What if he didn't have the support persons like his sisters creating a Twitter account, or the community who set up the Twitter account to raise awareness? What if the industry didn't, the tech industry didn't take this under them and make this a cause that they rally around? What if this was just one of many incidents of racism and discrimination? Now, things may have turned out differently, and it's this interaction between the individual and the people and environments around them that really impacts their life pathway or the developmental trajectory they have. So for us to really understand American Muslim youth experiences, we really need to take an understanding, try to understand the varying sources of nuances that impact the pathway of young Muslims today. And that's really what we want to focus on today, because there's no one way for people to understand Muslim youth unless you realize that they're not a monolithic group. It is a heterogeneous group with many different factors that need to be considered. And so when we think about Muslim youth, there are a couple major areas that we need to be aware of. One is that we need to understand the individual and the personal characteristics and traits and situations and histories of that person, because that individual then interacts with their social context. The social context, such as what are the different environments they're in, their family, their school network, the community, their neighborhood. Those two factors also impact with this concept called fluidity, which is things that change in time, situations, phases in life. We won't go into that aspect in detail, but really want to focus tonight on what are the individual characteristics that you need to be aware of, either as a youth worker, as a parent, as a teacher, or community activist, and then understand the social context that may impact the experience of American Muslim youth. Now, on the right-hand side, there's a more comprehensive model that really highlights in greater detail both the direct and indirect effects of varying environments, as well as how society and time and culture, how they all play a role in shaping a young person's development. Now, when we think about the individual, there are a couple different factors we need to be aware of. So when we talk about any young person, we need to realize that their specific traits, personalities, experiences impact who they are and how they experience the world. Now we look at Ahmed. He was intelligent. He was able to go into a STEM magnet school, and he was excited about building robots. Well, when this incident happened and the tech industry heard about what happened, they really made it a cause that they rallied for. So you see this protective factor, which is intelligence, which is part of his cognitive abilities, now interacting with the world in a way that serves to protect him and help him. Had he not been intelligent, had he had cognitive impairments, we don't know if the response would have been at the same level. Similarly, we need to acknowledge that race and racial identity also matters. Now, in his case, the fact that he was identified as someone brown and not black is something that for us to consider why. Because for the most part, when we think of individuals of African descent, either originally from Africa, in his case, his father was from Sudan, he can identify with multiple different groups. He can identify with Arab culture as well as African culture, but in reality, what you see is individuals with such backgrounds are often seen by the environment as black. And so in this case, race also is often an issue to consider, and also, and not just in this case, if we think of other cases such as Trayvon Martin's murder, right? The media didn't talk about his intelligence or the fact that he had attended NASA camp. The media bias was clearly present by the images that they showed, the information they shared, the languages they used, and how they compared him to George Zimmerman. And here you see how an individual's race, unfortunately, became a risk factor, something that literally took his life. And so, again, you see how these individual factors impact how the individual experiences the world around them and how they see themselves. Now, again, going back to Ahmed, he identified with being Muslim, and he was not expecting the support that he did because of the fact that he perceived the environment to not positively accept Muslims. And so you see the response being the way it was really altered his image and his view of the world. Similarly, when we think about such factors such as health, whether the young person has a medical illness, which is a risk factor, and that can impact on what they can and can't do. It can impact their academic abilities, if they have a learning disorder, which then in turn impacts their school performance, acceptance by peer. And so you see how these individual factors can really have this domino effect and impact so many different other factors in their environment. And again, similarly with personal history, if a young person has experience of neglect, abuse, these factors are constantly moving. These are all different aspects of the person's personal history, which can have an impact on their developmental outcome and the decisions that they make. Similarly, spirituality, their connection to their faith, their belief system, whether they have a connection or they don't, can serve as a protective factor. If an individual does have a strong belief system and a moral compass, it gives the individual, a young person, certain guidelines, connects them to other individuals, and the absence may result in a lack of clarity and lack of specific guidelines in which may result in them engaging behaviors that can put them at risk. So you see here how all of these different factors can impact the decisions the individual makes, the young person makes, as well as the opportunities that come to him or her, and the pathways that open up. And so what you see again, this individual personality traits, their health, and all of these different factors, spiritual, cognitive, personal history, identity, these are all factors that impact what they're able or not able to do and how they interact with the world around them.